I am an old man now, and people who see me sitting quietly don't know that I once lived inside a nightmare that never truly ended, because I was 19 when the war took me, and from that moment time broke apart. Days and nights stopped meaning what they used to, and fear became the air we breathed. The first night at the front teaching me that darkness is never empty, that it whispers and crawls and smells of sweat, mud, and death, a smell you cannot forget even decades later when it returns in dreams. Because the first body I ever saw was not heroic or dramatic, but just a man lying face down with one boot missing. And that was when I understood how easily I could become the same thing. How fast boys stopped being boys and turned into survivors who no longer spoke of home, because remembering hurt more than the cold, more than hunger, more than the screams. And I saw villages erased from the earth, where families were found holding each other in silence, a child's shoe in the dirt with no child left to wear it. And winter came like a living enemy that froze fingers black and made men lie down in the snow and never rise again. And sometimes we did not shake them because we were afraid to know. And we took prisoners who looked exactly like us, terrified and crying in languages we could not understand. And for one brief moment the war vanished until an order brought it back. And near the end we reached a camp that I was not prepared for, a place where the living looked dead and the dead were everywhere, where eyes were too large for hollow faces and hands grabbed my sleeve, whispering words I could not understand, but pain I could. And that night grown men cried, because no training prepares you for seeing what humans can do to other humans. And when the war ended, people celebrated and called us heroes, but heroes do not wake up screaming, or see faces in the dark, or feel guilt for surviving when others did not, because I came home, but part of me stayed there, in the mud, in the snow, in the silence after gunfire. And I tell this not for praise or pity, but because war is not dates or maps or numbers. It is memory. It is boys who never returned, villages that no longer exist, screams that never truly stopped. And if you are listening to this, then remember us not as heroes, but as warnings, because war does not create monsters, it reveals them.
I thought that once the war was over, the memories would fade, that distance and time would soften the edges. But that was the first lie peace ever told me, because the war followed me home in ways I did not understand at first, hiding in ordinary moments like the sound of a door slamming or fireworks in the distance that sent my heart racing before my mind could catch up. And I returned to a house that felt smaller than I remembered, to faces that smiled but could not see the things behind my eyes. And people asked me what it was like over there, what I saw, what I did, and I learned very quickly to say I'm fine, because the truth made rooms go quiet and made people uncomfortable. So I carried it alone, night after night, waking up soaked in sweat, because in my dreams I was still there, still running through mud that pulled at my boots, still hearing voices calling my name from the dark, voices of men who didn't make it back, men whose faces grew clearer with time instead of fading. And sometimes I would wake up convinced I was back in the camp, smelling sickness and smoke, seeing eyes staring at me, asking questions I could never answer. And during the day, I tried to be normal. I worked, I ate, I laughed when I was supposed to. But inside, I was always listening, always scanning exits, always waiting for something terrible to happen, because war teaches you that calm is just a pause before chaos. And years passed like that, decades even, and I watched the world move on while I stayed frozen in moments that never ended. I watched children grow up who knew nothing of hunger or fear the way we did, and part of me was grateful, while another part was angry. Angry that they could sleep so easily, angry that the world could forget so quickly. And sometimes I would sit alone and think of the men who never got the chance to grow old, who never held their children or complained about aching bones or watched the sun rise on a quiet morning. And I would wonder why I was spared when better men were not, a question with no answer that eats at you slowly. And now that I am old, now that my body is failing in ways the war never managed to do, I feel those memories pressing closer, louder, as if they know time is running out. And I am telling this because soon there will be no one left who was there, no one left who can say, I saw this with my own eyes. And when that happens, the war risks becoming a story, a lesson, a statistic, instead of what it truly was, a wound carved into millions of lives. And if you remember anything from my words, remember that the real cost of war is not paid when the guns fall silent. It is paid for decades after, in quiet rooms, in sleepless nights, in the lives of those who survived and were never truly allowed to come back. Because the war ended, yes, but for some of us, it never really stopped.